Hello and welcome to the first of this series on graphing things by hand. We're going to be looking at a three-part series here. First is going to be looking at how do you set up a graph, how do you plot data. The second video is going to be looking at how do you find a best fit line by hand. And then the third video is going to be how do you find the slope of that line. All very important things, so make sure you check them all out. But let's start with here. Let's say you're given this data set. We don't know what it came from. We can assume it came from maybe, let's say, a car driving somewhere, and you have this data set of the car. And we're asked to plot it and fit it to a line, whether that's to find how fast on average the car is going or what. But we'll assume it's something along those lines. So we're given this data set, and we want to plot it. So the first thing we need to do is, boom, get graph paper. Let me rearrange some things here so that everything is fine and dandy. Let me zoom out a little bit and then refocus. Awesome. So we've got this graph and we have this data set and we have this graph paper. So what we can do is we can just, every graph has two axes. So let's go ahead and just put an origin. Let's put it here. And this doesn't really matter at all. Let's go ahead and put it there. I'll zoom out a little bit further. And then we're going to want to draw our two axes. Now make sure you're using a ruler when you're drawing any straight line by hand. Otherwise things can get really kind of wonky. We're going to draw this axis, and since it's a line, it has an arrow on both ends. And then we're going to do the same thing for our horizontal axis. And once again, it doesn't really matter where you put your origin as long as you have space. So I know all my numbers are positive. All my numbers here are positive. So I know I'm going to be working in this quadrant. So that's why I put it all the way over to the left side. But it depends on whatever data set you're using. But let's go with this. We have our axes. Now there are three things that every really good graph needs. The first is a title. Okay, let's go ahead and add a title to this graph. So our data set is distance versus time. So we'll go ahead and we can do distance versus time. And that's our title. We could say like of car if we want to, but the two big things that we need to make sure we have are our two variables, our distance and our time. That's the two really, really important things that needs to be in this title. Okay, so title, check, we have that. Axis labels with units and scale. Okay, so let's go move on to this one, axis labels with units and scale. Our two variables are distance and time, and we have two axes. So let's go ahead and say that this horizontal one is time, since that is our independent variable. And let's say that our vertical axis is distance then. Just like that. Now what it said was we need to put units and labels, units and a scale. So our units for time in our table are seconds, and our units for distance are meters. So let's go ahead and do that. Awesome, so now we have axis labels with units. Now we need to put a scale on here. So our time, if you look at our time data, it jumps by 2 every single time. It jumps by 2. So I'm just going to use that pattern. I'm going to say this is 1, which makes this 3, 5, 7, just like that. Now these axes were a little big, but that's okay. We'll go with it for now. Normally you want your graph to take up as much of your axes as possible, so I could have used a different scale, but I'm going to keep going with this for now. Now our distance ranges from 4 to 28. And they're all even numbers also, which is really interesting. So since they're all even numbers and they have a pretty big range, I'm gonna jump by 2's here. So I'm gonna say this will be 2, then this will be 6, 10, 12, 14, 18, 22, 26, 30, and I could keep going, but I'm gonna be good with that. Let me zoom in so you can see that, what I've done so far. So I've done that. I have my 2 labels on either side. I have the units, and I have scales on either side. So, number 2, done. Booyah. Let's move on to number 3, plotted data. So for this, it's super simple. We just look at our data table, and we look at our axes. So it looks like the first point is 1, 4. So over here, 1, you go up to 4, and you put a point right there. Next one is 3, 12, over to 3, up to 12. That one goes right there. 5, 10. 7, 14. That's this point. 9, 18. Let me move my data set out of the way. Let me zoom out so you can see it a little better. 9, 18, over to 9, up to 18. 11, 24. And 13, 28. 28 is here, right there. Awesome. So there we have it. There is our plot. It has all 3 things that we need for a first plot. As a title up here, and the distance and the 2 variables you need are required here, the 2 variables. It has axis labels, time and distance, and it has the units, meters and seconds, and it has the scales, the numbers on that graph. And the third thing it needs is the plotted data. That's that set of dots right there. Awesome. So we're going to come back in the next video and we're going to learn how to put a best fit line to this. So see you in the next video. Later.